So listen, Michigan is perhaps the greatest example of exactly how much people underestimated the depth of disdain that America had for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Trump's win in Michigan was an all-out shocker 4 years ago. And today it feels like a different story. If you were to believe the polls, and everybody who listens to this show knows that I do not, Biden is up 7 in Michigan. Biden has an advantage with Black voters, with independents, with seniors, with women. Trump is unsurprisingly leading with evangelical Christians. The money also points to Biden. He's spending like $10 million on the air in the state versus Trump's $3 million. Now, Tim wrote a piece in September, which was, just ended yesterday, that asked how long Trump would contest Michigan. And so, yes, let's figure out if that's really the right question and whether he will contest Michigan in these final weeks of the contest. First, I'm going to Alex. What is the state of play? What do the polls say?
Well, I think of the core 6 battleground states that we talk about every week on the show, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, it would seem that Michigan is in the worst place for the Trump campaign, that of all the states, as Tim wrote about, it might be the one most likely that Trump is going to pull out of because he doesn't actually need to win Michigan to win the Electoral College. Now, the problem is, though, that Donald Trump, yes, he has a Michigan problem, but I think more broadly, it seems at this moment, a month before the election, he has an upper Midwest problem. He has a Great Lakes problem. The same movement away from his campaign that we see in polls in Michigan, we also see in Wisconsin, and we also see in Pennsylvania. There was some question about whether Pennsylvania was trending just as significantly away from Trump as the other 2 states. A pair of polls released this week showed Biden with a 9-point advantage in Pennsylvania, a state that many people see as a tipping point. And it really seems as if the problem is concentrated among white voters and maybe in equal parts white suburban voters and the white working class voters. And there's some speculation, and I think there needs to be probably more reporting on this point, that the reason we see, in the last couple of weeks, Kristin, we have talked about Florida and North Carolina. It's 2 states that are still incredibly competitive, effectively dead heats in both. And we even talked with Jim Morrow of the Charlotte Observer last week about why North Carolina was so stubbornly supportive of Donald Trump, even as other states seem to drift away from him. And I think one of the answers is just the white working class vote in these upper Midwest states, north of the Mason-Dixon line, is really a problem for Donald Trump right now. And you could probably even specify further, white working class women are a problem in a way that we don't see in some southern states. And maybe that's a difference between some of the voters in the southern tend to be more evangelical, and that might be a reason. But I don't think there's any doubt that Michigan and the upper Midwest is a problem for Donald Trump. And I think as Tim wrote about, there's some real question about how much longer Donald Trump might even compete in a state like that.
So what's it feel like on the ground there, Tim? We know what the polls say. Do the lawn signs agree?
So they do and they don't. Here's the thing about lawn signs, Kristin, and it was sort of a punchline 4 years ago, but I think we all recognize that there's something to this idea of visibility and visible intensity on the ground. So the Trump signs are still there. The biggest difference from 4 years ago is that there are Biden signs now. And you didn't see Hillary signs 4 years ago. And it's not that the Biden signs have pulled up at like a 1-to-1 ratio with the Trump signs, but what I've really been struck by, and I've done a lot of driving over the last 3 weeks around Michigan and also into Wisconsin, up into PA, you see a pretty healthy number of Biden signs. And that suggests to me not necessarily some groundswell of intensity for Biden, but a groundswell of intensity against Trump that was missing 4 years ago. There just was not this enthusiasm on the ground to defeat Donald Trump. And obviously, you could say that it's sort of splitting hairs, or that it's, 6 of one, half dozen of another, to talk about anti-Trump intensity versus pro-Democratic intensity. At the end of the day, what matters is that voters seem mobilized now in a way that they weren't 4 years ago. Matter of fact, I was having a conversation with a guy in Wisconsin, one of the smartest Republicans in the state, who's a big Trump supporter. And this was while I was out there a couple of weeks ago on a reporting trip. And he said, look, man, he's like, I can tell you one thing for sure. He said, the intensity on the ground among the left right now is way, way surpassing what it was during the Scott Walker recall. And he said, and he said, and for me, that was the high water mark of my lifetime. He said, I never thought we'd see Democratic intensity like we saw in the recall. He said, this is light years beyond that.
I assumed you were going to say it was greater than the 2016 presidential race.
That's what I was going to say too. That's
no.
That's a
I know,
recall.
and that like knocked me off my chair. I was just as shocked as you guys. And again, this is a guy who's a big Trump supporter and who's working to get Trump reelected. And he said, I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what this is, what this means for us, right? And you keep in mind that, look, you guys know this, but a lot of people forget. Donald Trump, in a state like Wisconsin, especially, Donald Trump won fewer votes in Wisconsin in 2016 than Mitt Romney won there in 2012. Like, this was not some, sort of force of nature, norm-shattering performance by Trump. He ran well behind Ron Johnson, the U.S. senator, on the same ticket. Trump wasn't that strong in Wisconsin. It's just that Hillary Clinton was very, very, very weak. And it was the same story in Pennsylvania, and certainly it was the same story in Michigan. When you see these threadbare margins from 4 years ago, it's sometimes all of the noise and the fury of the Trump presidency can make us forget that these were margins so thin and really so insignificant that anything at all could change them. Like the slightest little breeze in our political environment could change them. And we're not looking at breezes right now, right? We are looking at gusts. We're looking at significant changes in the political ecosystem. And in a state like Michigan, look, it's ultimately pretty simple. You've got a convergence of three things happening at the same time, right? And this is what I've seen on the ground all over the state. First, you've got an uptick in enthusiasm and in intensity, again, to use that word, among Black voters. Now, it might not be a huge uptick, right? You're not going to see a return to Obama-era turnout levels among Black voters in Detroit, Lansing, Flint, Saginaw, and elsewhere, but you're going to see an uptick. There's almost no question about that. And any uptick, again, you're talking about a state that the president won by 10,704 votes. So any uptick among the African-American population here is going to be meaningful. Second, you've got white college-educated suburbanites, especially in Southeast Michigan and the ring of counties around Detroit. They are fleeing from Trump's GOP. We've seen that over the last 4 years. We saw it in 2018 when two longtime Republican safe congressional seats were flipped by Democrats, and now those two freshman Democratic congresswomen are basically viewed as locks to win re-election. Those areas that were once drawn specifically to be lockdown red districts are now purple trending blue. And that is just a direct reflection of the critical mass of college-educated, affluent, two-car garage suburban voters in Oakland County and Livingston County that have turned their back on the Republican Party. They've turned their back on their lifelong partisan affiliation, at least as long as Trump is on the scene. And so that's the second part. And then the third part, you guys mentioned it, but it doesn't get enough attention. The white working class that Trump was so dominant with 4 years ago, there's this expectation that he's going to perform to that same level again. And it's going to be really, really hard. I mean, I think nationally, the number with non-college whites was 29% for Hillary Clinton, if I recall. I think in Michigan, it was 32 or 33%. Like, those are anemic numbers, right? And Donald Trump really captured lightning in a bottle. He happened to have this really unique appeal to the blue collar white base in a state like Michigan and in PA and in Wisconsin. And he also happened to be facing somebody who was really uniquely unpopular with that same base. And so he was able to run up the score in ways that we never could have imagined.